Hey YouTubers, this is Jacques from Jacques Photography, and today I got these two cameras. I got the X-T3 right here, and I have the X-T30 right here.
Between concrete walls, there's a place for us where we could go, where we could be alone.
Before this video starts, make sure you check the link in the description on my new album that just came out. It's called Jacques Volume 1.
If you go to B&H today at the actual launch of this video, you're going to find out that the X-T3 is at $13.99 and the X-T30 is at $8.99. Both of these cameras are really good. They're good for stills, but they're also, and that's the new thing I wanted to say, is that Fuji with the new 3 line has made themselves contenders in the video market. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because I'm really going to be looking at the differences ergonomically speaking, and also look at the differences between the functionality, what you get more on the X-T3 that you don't get on the X-T30, and is it justifiable to pay that $500 extra to go and get the X-T3. So guys, let me start off by talking to you about the similarities of these cameras.
Both sport a 26.1 megapixel X-Trans 4 APS-C size sensor with back illuminated structure. Both have a quad-core X processor 4. Both have a native ISO of 160 to 12,800. Both have phase detection AF with 99% sensor area cover range. Burst shooting are identical for both in electronic shutter at 20 and 30 frames per second with no blackout at 1.25 crop. Both have sports finder and pre-shot modes. Both have monochrome adjustment and color chrome effect. Both have the Eterna film simulation for your video. And both have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connectivity. Wow. The most obvious difference is that the X-T30 is a great deal smaller than the X-T3. On the X-T30, gone are many of the analog controls that have characterized all that is the Fuji brand. Much of this is done to cater to the more point-and-shoot oriented market of the X-T30. There is no ISO dial on the X-T30, but make no mistake, all the functionality of the X-T3 is still under the hood. The X-T30's form factor simply makes the functions a bit less physically accessible. Now, that being said, the X-T30's joystick implementation simply borders genius. The X-T30's joystick not only allows you to choose focus point, but also allows an amazing way to navigate menu and function options while using the camera. You will not miss the 4-point touchpad in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I would even say that if you decide to use the X-T30 as a B cam, you will have less of an adjustment to make between switching from the X-T3 to the X-T30 when you do use them.
I want to mention also that what happens is when you start using the 0 series cameras like X-T3 versus X-T30 and X-T2 versus X-T20 with the 0 at the end, when you start using the 0 series cameras, the Q button right here becomes a lot more important. Now, what they've done with the Q button is they brought it up, and it is really nicely placed. So they were able to move that Q button out of the way and bring it up on a lump on the side. It's just very well implemented. So the Q button is something that's extremely important. So the fact that it's actually brought up is kind of cool, and I really did like that aspect of the camera. Anyone who is very sensitive to the fact that you need to get quick access to your memory card, the X-T3 has the professional feature of having the memory cards on the side. So whenever you're putting a tripod underneath, you do not have problems getting to your actual cards. The problem with the X-T30 is that you do have to, there is no side address. You cannot go get the memory cards and change them out on the side. You have to go underneath near the battery section right here. It's kind of a downer, that situation, but I think what happens is that Fuji wanted to save space. So if it is something that you might be sensitive about, don't think of getting the X-T30. You'll have to go to the X-T3 to be able to have easily accessible memory cards and dual memory card slots.
So the X-T3 has all the typical add-ons that a more professional camera would have. Larger size means better grip. It is dust, moisture, and freeze-proof, whereas the X-T30 is not. But remember that the X-T30 has a more walk-around friendly feature set that the X-T3 does not have. These include an almost pocketable size, pop-up flash, and one-click auto switch brought over from the X-T20.
So let me interject a bit of a critique on both the cameras, the X-T30 and the X-T3. Both cameras have touchscreen integration. Now, I just don't like Fuji's touchscreen implementation. I think it could be a lot better, and it could be more, how can I say, full-featured. There's always some sort of exception or something they don't give you, like they'll let you do touch focus, but you can't do something else. I always compare a lot to Canon, but when you get into Canon, it's mindless. You just walk in, you touch, the responsiveness is there, the menu navigation works really great, everything works fantastic, and that is not the case for the Fuji line in general. Whenever we have touchscreen implementation, it's something I think that they could improve all the way for sure.
In general, unlike the X-T20, the X-T30 fits well in the hand despite its smaller size. I think that it would be foolish to think that you will lose any sort of maneuverability or comfort by buying the X-T30. All differences in feel and size are things that one can get used to. Now, just like the X-T20 versus X-T2 line, the coverage, refresh rate, and image quality of the Viewfinder are similar, but the size is a lot bigger on the X-T3. You will find yourself feeling a lot more comfortable when you put your eye next to it. The other one is smaller on the X-T30, but definitely not a loss in terms of quality. A couple of other points to take into account is that the weight of the X-T30 is substantially lower.
Now, basically, you just heard about the ergonomics of the two cameras and where they differ. Now we're going to get into the functionality, and also we're going to talk a bit about the photo realities of the two cameras, but we'll also talk about the video differences. And I think that's where both these cameras really differ. After that, once you know about functionality, ergonomics, and video, you will be able to basically decide which camera is better for you. But let's get into the functionality.
In autofocus, both cameras are equipped with the crazy phase detection autofocus points covering almost the entirety of the field of view, face and eye detection, customizable continuous autofocus settings, and hyper-fast reaction times on all of these features. Now, both cameras offer great electronic shutter burst rates, and once you accept to use the electronic shutter and a small 1.25 crop, you can get crazy blackout-free burst rates of 20 and 30 frames per second. While in mechanical shutter, the X-T3 offers a slight advantage of 11 frames per second as opposed to 8 frames per second. But who is counting? Now here's the amazing stuff you get with the X-T3. 4K at 60 frames per second internally. You get 420 10-bit color depth. You get long GOP IPB, and amazing all-intra compression is also offered. Up to 400 megabits per second, 30 frames per second, or 200 megabits per second, 60 frames per second. You get H.264 and completely hard to edit H.265.
So now, to this day, I still find myself debating the whole idea and the utility of 4K footage in general. I do not find myself delivering it to clients. I do not find myself using it. I don't find myself scaling down, and I don't find myself digital zooming like everyone talks about how it's good. I still believe to this day that great 1080p footage is a lot better than 4K footage. 4K footage for now is a headache, but maybe later on it might be good. So depending on how you feel about 4K, you might want to stick to the X-T3. If you are like me, who doesn't give a... You have 4K on the X-T30 offered as a little gadget with a couple of time constraints that aren't that grave, especially when you're shooting B-roll, but it's still there. It's just not as implemented as well as on the X-T3. So let's continue on the 1080p differences between the two cameras.
Now, the X-T30 will be a downgrade in terms of 4K footage, either with external or internal recording, but you will be hard-pressed to see the differences between the two cameras for video if you decide to film in 1080p. So on the X-T30, recording caps are applied at 10 minutes in 4K and 15 minutes in full HD, whereas the X-T3 goes to the usual 30 minutes for 4K and HD. X-T3 and X-T30 both output 4K to the HDMI in 422 10-bit. The only difference is that the X-T3 does it at 60p and the X-T30 only does it at 30p.
So guys, I just shot a lot of stats at you, and I just wanted to tell you that I think the decision is pretty easy. And what it all boils down to is the idea is that you got to really look at your workflow, how you work, what you do with your camera. Are you a person who shoots a lot of professional gigs? Are you somebody who goes out and just walks around and does stuff? So obviously, the obvious answers to those questions: walk around, X-T30. Professional wedding photographer, X-T3. You get two X-T3 bodies and you are gonna be laughing for wedding photography. Oh, I was putting up the wrong camera. Oh, that's funny. This camera right here will be advantageous in the fact that it is smaller, so you might want to do walk around with this. Anyone doing street photography, I would highly recommend the X-T30 over the X-T3. Street photography, at this price, you could go out and get yourself two X-T30 bodies and play with some lenses and have them hanging off you when you go out. They're small, you can get a pancake in there as well. So anything involving street photography, the X-T30 is the place to go. Anyone involved into professional level video or photography production, you want to take the X-T3. Your video capabilities are crazy. Now, the other thing you might want to have the X-T30 for, is this the right one? No, one of the big reasons you might want to have the X-T30 for is if you own an X-T3 and you need a B camera, at the price they sell it, it can be a second body when you're doing a professional gig to do a second camera for video and a lot of other stuff. So it might also be a cool camera if you want it, if you need a good B cam, because they both accept the X line of lenses. I really got to tell you guys that the X-T30 is something that is really, it's just an impressive camera, and the size of it, it is like just so small. Like it's just sitting here, and here's the X-T3. But you can just see that it is a lot smaller than any DSLR, and it packs a punch. It really does pack a punch. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Listen, if you can, give me some comments on what you think. Does anyone out there own the X-T30? Does anyone have an X-T3 and might be thinking of getting a second cam? It is a nice, cheap option. It really is. You guys like, share, subscribe, and don't forget, everybody, keep on making something from nothing.
Between concrete walls, there's a place for us where we could go, where we could be alone.